Mr. President, I want to begin by congratulating Senator Mikulski on her continued efforts in fighting for pay equality for women workers. This is a struggle that has gone on for decades. We are making some progress, but we have a long way to go, and it's imperative that we pass the Ledbetter legislation. Mr. President, yesterday, as everybody in the world knows, Barack Obama was sworn in as the President of the United States, and I can tell you that in my state of Vermont, and I expect all over this country, and in fact in virtually every country in the world, there was great anticipation and great joy, not only because we have made history in our country by electing the first African-American ever elected president here, but also because the people of this country demand that we begin moving America in a very, very different direction than where we have been going for the last 8 years. Unfortunately, as President Obama assumes office, the Congress, the American people, and he are looking out at a set of the most serious problems that our country has faced since the Great Depression. And let me just take a very few minutes to give a broad outline of some of those problems and some of the efforts that I personally will be making in order to address these crises. Mr. President, as a result of the outrageous greed and recklessness and dishonesty on the part of a few hundred or a few thousand speculators on Wall Street, our entire financial system is in danger of collapsing. And that impacts not only the United States, but in fact, the financial markets all over the world. And at this point, the American taxpayer, primarily the middle class, have already put into the TARP bailout some $700 billion. But in addition to that, the Fed has lent out trillions of dollars with virtually no transparency and certainly no accountability. This is a crisis that we have got to deal with in a number of ways, and I will tell you, as somebody who voted against the original bailout, who voted against the second bailout, we just have got to develop a mechanism that does more than pump hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to bail out Wall Street. This is a difficult issue, it is a complicated issue, but it's an issue that we have got to address. Furthermore, in my view, we need an investigation to get at the root of the problem. I reject the idea, as some suggest, that this was a problem caused by everybody. All of us are guilty in causing this financial crisis. That's wrong. The fact is that there are a relatively small number of people, by and large people who in the last 5 to 10 years have made hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, in some cases, have accrued billions of dollars of wealth for themselves, who have operated in utter recklessness and, in my suspicion, in illegal mannerisms in order to make these incredible profits and to bring our financial system to the edge of collapse. We need to know who these people are, how they did it, hold them accountable, and create legislation which makes sure that we never, ever again are placed in a position that we are today. But, Mr. President, the truth of the matter is that while the financial crisis of the last few months has exacerbated the economic problems that we are facing as a nation today, the truth is that for many, many years, despite the assertions of the Bush administration, the middle class has been in a significant state of decline. Poverty has been increasing. Millions of people have lost their health insurance and their pensions. And what is happening today as a result of the financial crisis and the huge increase in unemployment, what you're seeing is a situation is that when people lose their jobs, they are losing their health insurance. When they are losing their income, they are losing their ability to maintain their homes, and they are losing their homes. When they are losing their income, they're unable to take care of their parents. They're unable to send their kids to college, and the dreams that many people have fought for their entire working lives are now disappearing. I can tell you that in the state of Vermont, we have received many, many emails and communications from people, elderly workers, who have told me that they've spent their whole lives working so that they would have a secure retirement, and now that retirement is disappearing with the decline of the stock market. We are in the midst of a grave crisis, and we're going to need some bold thinking in order to get out of it. But not only are we seeing a huge increase in unemployment, people losing their health insurance, poverty increasing, the reality is that we continue to have, and we do not talk about this enough, by far the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major nation on earth. And I know that in my years in the House and here in the Senate, I hear some of my colleagues talk about family values. Well, let me say very clearly that having the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world is not a family value. It is a national disgrace. And every psychologist in the world will tell you that when kids grow up in poverty, when kids do not have early childhood education, when kids go to poor schools, there is a direct correlation about that reality and the fact that we have more people behind bars today, more people in jail than any country in the world, including China. How does that happen? That millions of Americans end up in jail more so than in an authoritarian country like China. And if you think it does not have a relationship to the high rate of childhood poverty in this country, the fact that we're not investing in our kids, I think you would be wrong. Mr. President, last year we continued the process of seeing a growing gap between the very, very rich and everybody else. And I know this is not an issue that many people in the Congress choose to talk about, but it is an issue that must be talked about, not only from a sense of morality, but from a sense of basic economic well-being. In my view, it is not acceptable that the top 0.1% earn more income than the bottom 50%. It is not acceptable that the top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 90%. And that whole issue of greed is something that we as a Congress and as a nation have got to be talking about. Do people really need billions and billions of dollars in personal wealth when we have children in this city and all over this country who are living out in the streets and who are denied basic, decent quality child care? Is that the kind of nation that we are about? Mr. President, since the year 2000, nearly 6 million Americans have slipped out of the middle class and into poverty. Median income for working-age families has gone down by over $2,300. Over 7 million Americans have lost their health insurance. More than 4 million decent-paying manufacturing jobs have been lost, and over 4 million workers have lost their pensions. And that all of those figures will get worse because of the statistics that we have seen in recent months because of the financial crisis. Mr. President, the dream of a college education is fading away for many, many working families in my state and all over this country as college costs go up while incomes go down. And we're seeing a situation where hundreds of thousands of qualified students are unable to go to college because they simply don't have the money to do that, and many others are coming out deeply in debt and have to take jobs which they would rather not take in order to pay back their student loans. Meanwhile, in the last 8 years, despite with the bailout of Wall Street, with ongoing tax breaks for the very, very wealthy, and with the war in Iraq, we now have a national debt of over $10.5 trillion. Mr. President, another issue that this Congress has got to deal with is address the reality that the United States of America remains the only major country on earth that does not provide health care to all of our people, and yet we end up spending substantially more per capita on health care than any other nation. But 47 million Americans have no health insurance. Almost 20,000 Americans die every single year because they don't have access to decent primary health care. They can't find a doctor when they need it, and we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. With a new president, with a new Congress, the American people are asking whether finally we will have the courage to stand up to the lobbyists who are outside of this building every single day or walking the corridors. Can we stand up to the insurance companies? Can we stand up to the drug companies so that we finally will provide quality health care, low-cost prescription drugs to every man, woman, and child as a right of citizenship? Will we have the courage to do that? I certainly hope we will. Mr. President, as we speak, we are currently involved in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which have cost us not only the lives of thousands and thousands of wonderful young men and women, but they cost us over $10 billion every single month. These wars are also stretching the Army and our National Guard to the breaking point. My hope is that in the next several months, we will be developing policy to bring our troops home from Iraq as soon as we possibly can. And I hope very much that we will have not only a debate right here in Congress, but a national conversation about how we deal with the very, very difficult issues of Afghanistan. Mr. President, despite the reality of global warming, our nation still, despite decades of talk, has not yet broken our dependency on fossil fuel and foreign oil. In fact, every single year, we are spending more than $500 billion bringing in oil from abroad. And we have only just begun, to make the advances that we need to make in terms of energy efficiency and sustainable energy. As a member of both the Environmental Committee and the Energy Committee, it is my view that we have the potential to create millions of good-paying jobs as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. We can do that. We must do that. Now, Mr. President, as you well know, the major issue that this Congress is going to be dealing with in the next several weeks is an economic recovery program. And I strongly support the basic outlines of that program. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of debate about the details within it, and the hope that we can target that money in such a way to create good-paying jobs as quickly as possible in the most cost-effective way imaginable. What I can tell you, Mr. President, is that in my state, and I expect that in the other 49 states in this country, our infrastructure is collapsing. We have roads in the state of Vermont which have huge problems. We have all kinds of bridges that are in need of repairs in our small towns. We have water systems that are simply inadequate. We have wastewater plants that need to be rebuilt, all of which are very, very expensive propositions. So in the stimulus package, my hope is that we are going to put substantial sums of money rebuilding our roads, our bridges, our water systems. I hope we begin to make the investment that we need in public transportation. Certainly rural transportation in the state of Vermont has many, many needs. If you are a worker in one part of the state, you want to go 50 miles to your job, in almost every case, there is no public transportation to get you there. If you're a senior citizen, you want to go to the hospital, you want to go to the grocery store, very hard to get there if you do not have a car, and I suspect that's true all over rural America. In addition, our rail system is far behind where Europe, Japan, and even China is now advancing toward. So I hope and will support a major increase in funding to create substantial number of new jobs as we rebuild our infrastructure. In addition, I know President Obama has been very strong on this issue, and I agree with him. We need to invest heavily in energy efficiency. I can tell you that in the state of Vermont, and again, all over this country, but especially in cold weather states, you have older homes where energy is just going through the roof, literally going through the roof, through the windows, because of poor insulation. And we can create jobs making our homes, our offices, our schools more energy efficient. And we need to be extremely aggressive, as I mentioned a moment ago, in terms of public transportation. And also, right now we are just at the cusp of major breakthroughs in such renewable technologies as wind, solar, geothermal, and biomass. And I suspect that in 20 years, people will look back and see a very, very different energy system than we have right now. It will be a cleaner system. It will be a system not emitting greenhouse gas emissions. So, Mr. President, there is a lot of work that stands in front of us. There was an election in November where the people said, we want change. That is what that election was all about. And unless we are bold, unless we are prepared to take on the big money interests who have dominated legislation for the last many, many years, there will be a great deal of disappointment all over this country. So now is the time. I think there is a lot of enthusiasm in the work that President Obama has been doing since he has been elected. There is an enormous amount of hope and confidence in the air that we can move America in a new direction. So I hope that with new national leadership, with strong grassroots participation, with a Congress prepared to stand up and take on the powerful special interests that have dominated us for so many years, that we can fulfill the faith that the American people have expressed in us in recent years, and that, in fact, we can move America in a very different direction and become the country that all of us know that we can become. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And with that, I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be initiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate resumes consideration of S-181, the Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, on Thursday, January 22nd, that be up to 60 minutes of debate equally divided between Senators Hutchinson and Mikulski or their designees on the Hutchinson Amendment number 25 prior to a vote in relation to the amendment. Further, that no amendment be in order to the Hutchinson Amendment prior to the vote.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand in adjournment until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, January 22nd, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, and there be a period of morning business for up to 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each, with the Republicans controlling the first 30 minutes and the majority controlling the final 30 minutes, and that following morning business, the Senate resume consideration of S-181, the Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, as under the previous order.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, the first vote of the day will begin around 11:30 a.m. That vote would be in relation to the Hutchinson Amendment. If there is no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.